The film picks up 6 days after the events of the previous one. Joel spent the week haunted by the smile entity, ever since he witnessed Rose take her own life. Desperate to escape the curse, Joel tracks down a house linked to drug dealers. He forces the dealer inside, leading him in front of his brother before violently stabbing him in an attempt to rid himself of the curse. The brother opened fire on Joel, and in the ensuing chaos, the man is accidentally killed by Joel's shots. In a panic, Joel realizes that the curse cannot be passed on if the witness dies. His anxiety escalates, and a nearby dealer, Louis Fergoli, watches the scene unfold. The brother's associates soon arrive, chasing Joel. He runs to the street only to be struck by a car. His bloodied body is dragged across the pavement, leaving a smile-shaped trail. We then meet Skye Riley, a pop sensation preparing for an interview with Drew Barrymore. Although Skye's career has skyrocketed, she's been battling personal demons. Her history of substance abuse and the emotional scars from a tragic car accident that took the life of her boyfriend, actor Paul Hudson. Skye is managed by her mother, Elizabeth, but their relationship is strained, especially after the accident. Additionally, Skye has become distanced from her best friend, Gemma. Despite all of this, she hopes her upcoming tour will mark a fresh start and help her reclaim her life and career. After a meeting with her manager Darius and her assistant Joshua, Skye receives a message from Louis. She sneaks away to meet him in secret, hoping to score some Vicodin for the back pain she's struggling with. When Skye arrives at his apartment, things take a dark turn. Louis grabs her, holding a sword to her throat, and frantically tells her he doesn't remember sending the message. He insists that something sinister has been following him. Moments later, Louis erupts in terror, screaming as something invisible enters his mouth. A twisted smile creeps across his face. He grabs a weight plate and slams it into his own face multiple times, the skin ripping from his jaw. Skye is horrified, about to call 911, but then realizes the mess she could get into being at a drug dealer's place. Skye tries to push the incident out of her mind as she continues preparing for her tour. She attends a meet and greet with fans, but one particular fan, Alfredo, crosses a line. During a photo, he grabs Skye, telling her she's beautiful and that he wants to take her skin. Security intervenes and removes him. The unsettling encounter lingers in Skye's mind. She takes a moment to calm down and resumes the event, but then a young girl catches her eye, giving her an unnervingly familiar, creepy smile. Soon after, Skye receives an anonymous message asking if she had been at Louis's house. Back at her apartment, Skye begins to feel a growing unease. She hears strange noises and discovers a t-shirt she had signed for Alfredo, along with what appears to be his belongings, scattered across the floor all over the place. As she moves through the apartment, she sees what looks like Alfredo standing at the end of a dark hallway, completely naked. He starts chasing her. She races to the door, only to be greeted by Gemma, whom she had earlier called in an attempt to mend their strained relationship. Skye explains what happened with Louis, and Gemma agrees to stay the night. As they try to rest, Skye confesses to Gemma that she's been feeling a sense of darkness within herself long before the accident. Gemma, blunt as ever, responds that it's because Skye is a horrible person. In that moment, Skye sees the entity, disguised as Gemma, smiling at her and making a strange car honking noise. Skye wakes up the next morning, finding Gemma in the kitchen, making breakfast as though nothing happened. While rehearsing for her tour, Skye is struck by a sudden flash of Paul's image, which causes her to lose her balance and fall. She accuses one of her dancers of intentionally throwing her off. Skye storms to her room, only to find it in disarray. She immediately blames Jonathan, demanding to know why he trashed her space, but Elizabeth intervenes, pointing out that Joshua had been with her all day. Skye begins to realize how her behavior is spiraling out of control. Skye reluctantly attends a charity event hosted by Darius. While reading from the teleprompter, the words unexpectedly freeze, forcing her to improvise. What starts as a simple speech soon turns into a rant about her personal struggles. The teleprompter resumes, but not before it makes Skye read out Paul's name, sending her into a panic. She imagines Paul standing before her, smiling and approaching her. Skye screams at him to stop smiling. As an older woman tries to approach Skye to offer support, a bloodied Paul reappears, grabbing her and causing Skye to shove the woman off the stage. The audience watches in shock as Skye flees the scene. Back home, Skye receives more unsettling messages from the anonymous number. The messages reveal that the sender knows exactly what Skye has been experiencing. It includes a video Lewis made on his phone, in which he describes his horrifying encounter with the entity. The mysterious person invites Skye to meet them at a public location. Intrigued but fearful, Skye decides to go undercover and visits a bar where she meets Morris, the man who had been contacting her. Morris explains that his brother had been a victim of the entity and, in a fit of madness, tore his own jaw off with a crowbar. He's been tracking the pattern of events that plagued the victims and found Lewis's body, which led him to Skye. Morris suggests a drastic solution. He can stop Skye's heart to kill her temporarily, then revive her before the entity can claim her. Skye rejects his idea and storms off as fans begin to recognize her and crowd around her. Skye tries to find some peace at home, but the entity continues to haunt her. That evening, as she's trying to relax, the entity appears, taking the form of her backup dancers. They surround her, grinning eerily, and begin to chase her through the apartment. Skye runs in panic, but they eventually corner her. One of the dancers reaches out, seemingly sticking their arm down her throat. As she blacks out, everything goes dark. A flashback takes us to the night of the car accident. Skye and Paul were both under the influence of cocaine as Paul drove. Their argument escalated when Paul called Skye a psycho. In a fit of rage, Skye grabbed the wheel, steering them off the road. Skye wakes up in a hospital room after being found unconscious at her apartment. Elizabeth is by her side, but when Skye asks if they can cancel the tour due to her fragile mental state, her mother insists that it would be the end of her career. If Skye cancels this tour, the record label would sue them for millions. Skye's frustration boils over as she tells her mother that the only thing she cares about is her career. At that moment, the entity appears before Skye, disguised as Elizabeth. In a violent outburst, Elizabeth punches the mirror, her hand covered in blood, and begins stabbing herself repeatedly, even gouging her own eye out. In a daze, Skye tries to escape, but when she looks down, she sees what seems to be her mother's actual dead body. As she attempts to flee, Joshua saw the blood on her. Skye tries to run, but doctors and security guards quickly intervene. In a desperate move, she grabs a guard's gun and makes her escape. On the streets, Skye runs into Gemma and forces her driver at gunpoint to hand over the car so she can track down Morris. Gemma tries to convince Skye to let her come along, but as they drive, Skye's phone rings, revealing the real Gemma calling. It turns out that the entity had been posing as Gemma over the past few days. In a panic, Skye takes control of the car, speeding away with Gemma in tow, determined to get to Morris before it's too late. Skye arrives at an abandoned Pizza Hut, where she meets Morris to undergo the procedure that he believes will stop the entity's pursuit. They head to the freezer, hoping the cold will prevent any permanent brain damage. However, as the process begins, Morris unexpectedly leaves the room. The entity appears, taking the form of Skye from the night of the accident. It attacks her, but in a desperate act of self-defense, Skye bites off the entity's thumbs. She grabs a syringe meant to knock her out, but even that isn't enough to stop the entity. In a final act of vengeance, the entity locks Skye inside the freezer, leaving her trapped and helpless. Moments later, Skye finds herself on stage, standing before a live audience for the first show of her tour. To her shock, Elizabeth is sitting in the crowd with Joshua and Darius, along with hundreds of fans who eagerly await the performance. As Skye takes the stage, she sees the entity emerge from a shell of her own body, its grotesque face and monstrous form slowly crawling toward her. The entity forces its way into her mouth, and Skye collapses in front of the audience. But then, something strange happens. She rises again, a twisted smile spreading across her face. In a horrifying display, she takes the microphone and starts bashing her head with it, pushing it through her eye, all while the terrified audience watches in shock and disbelief. Her smile, now unyielding, has become a symbol of her tragic fall, her career, and ultimately her demise. If you were in Skye's shoes, what would you have done differently? Let me know below, and if you liked the story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe.